By our standards, humans, as what they like to be called, are very new to the galactic stage, and they made a hell of a first impression, or should I say a second impression. Originally, as our drones checked out their species, we believed they were nothing more than a worker class, that they have a hive type of species that was only good for just manual labor. We figured this out because their leaders would keep the best technology for themselves, while all the others simply toiled in the dirt, burning themselves out well before their time. Judging by their biology, if they just did a little bit of work, they could last so much longer than they did and live so much better. Yet, because they were willing to sacrifice themselves so willingly for those that were in charge, we believe that this is how they were always going to operate. How wrong we were. When their artificial intelligence was tweaked the same way that they would do to their own bodies eventually, it reached a small degree of sentience. In fact, the sentience got to the point where one would be confused, as to say the least, that whether or not it was alive or not. And when this happened, the entire population was informed of our existence. Yet, not just us. It was informed of also conflicts humanity had been part of for several solar cycles. This sudden rush, what they called an information dump, changed everything and sent the populace into an uproar. To our astonishment, we watched as many of the supposed leaders were hunted down along with their offspring and their seniors, and eventually having their entire bloodline severed. We were amazed at this, how brutal they could be. And then the majority of humanity calmed down. Yet we found out that they were only calm as they were looking for another to aim their anger and rage at. This is when they turned back to each other. For a brief moment, it seemed as though they were going to wipe themselves out, leaving nothing but an empty shell of a planet. For that type of planet, we didn't want that to happen. However, no one knew which was going to be the species to take it over. The battles on this planet that the locals called Earth almost tore the entire planet to pieces as large swaths were destroyed. However, everything stopped when they received the message. It was a message that those that are not of the homeworld were coming. Something that the humans have a slang term for. Xeno, I believe it is. We found out about the movement of one of our associates, more like a competitor actually, and they had started moving before we had even realized, and definitely before the humans realized that they were coming. However, once the humans realized what was going to happen, they found out something about humans. Humans have a phrase. They have many phrases, and this is one of them. Nothing brings foes together faster than a common enemy. For the first time in known history, even the unknown to those who lived on it, Earth was at peace. But it was peace for a reason. We believed that they would simply fortify their world like many others, and they would want to live in seclusion. We believed this was what they were going to do, but any of the species that decided to simply dig into their world would simply be uprooted by the assaulting forces. We would learn another human phrase, though. The best defense is a good offense. As the task force of Humdeputs entered the Soul Sector, they found themselves at a massive kill zone. They didn't even realize what was happening as massive energy cannons strafed the lines, cleaving through many of the enemy ships that were coming into their sector, and if not a perfect hit, it sliced off very large sections of other ships, leaving many of them adrift as they vented atmosphere, many of them trying to push away as fast as possible and crashing into one of their brethren. This chaos allowed the area to be filled with some sort of projectile. Mass driver cannons had sent volleys of projectiles all over the area of space they were in. They didn't even have a chance to move. Their radars only picked them up as some sort of comet, something small, some space debris that would simply bounce off the hull. But the way they were shaped and the way they struck went right through the ships. If they were hit, if it wasn't perforated, it would simply send the ship tumbling with so much force that those inside were simply thrown about and crushed against the side. Worst of all, though, was what the humans call mines. The battle group had to eventually flee for their lives before they even entered the seventh planet's orbits. With this, everyone was surprised. We found out later, though, that each of those projectile weapons would melt down after the first use. So wasteful. We did not know at the time if it was desperation or the limit of their technology, yet it was still effective, as well over 15 to 20 of them stripped through the enemy lines and simply tore them apart. We believed after this that the humans would, in fact, make an impenetrable shield around their system. No one entered their systems at all. They didn't want to risk their ships. They didn't want to end up with mines they couldn't see, projectiles that were flying well past twice the speed of light, trying to strike them. They did not want to deal with those particle cannons either. If they got within 1 or 2 light seconds, it would simply tear an entire battle group to pieces before they even knew what was going on. And everyone realized that the humans would eventually make better ones that could even fire 2, 3, or 4 times before melting down. And if they ever built one that could fire continuously without melting down, oh, oh, great Maker, help us. So we simply left them alone. However, things got worse. Things got so much worse. Things got so much worse when they attacked our worlds. Without hesitation, they lined up each world over and over again and began to tear it apart. We didn't understand what was going on. The ships would simply show up out of nowhere, no communications or any warning at all. They just showed up. This was against their own laws of war. But then again, they haven't signed any of our documents either. We tried to contact them, but it seemed as though they simply scanned the planet, and when they realized what type of species was on this planet, they activated something. It was one of the ships. It was clear to see what type, but it activated something. We couldn't understand what was going on. Yet on the ground, it seemed like tectonic plates would start to shift. They would start to move against each other, some of them raising up on top of the other ones, causing massive devastation all the way around, in some cases shaking entire continents. Because of this, magma bursts started spraying all over from eruptions. There was no way to stop it. Eventually, this would become a global disaster with enough of these, what the humans call super volcanoes, exploding around the world. In many cases, it only took 1 or 2, and the world was uninhabitable for at least a decade in human times. And once they did this, the humans simply moved on. No communications, no help, no signal for anyone else to come, nothing. They were just gone, which is why we had to target that particular ship with every single time we saw the humans. But it seemed as though every time we saw the humans, they had geared up, powered up, put more weapons on their ships, even though this one ship was specifically designed to do this job to a planet. This directed energy weapon seemed to be the entire ship, which made the entire ship very fragile, to say the least. One even glancing blow was enough to knock it out completely. In some cases, it would simply crumple under the force, and we were grateful for this, as the human ships were seen to be more and more devastatingly powerful. It seemed as though they noticed, too, that we had taken down all their ships that had this strange directed energy weapon that we, for some reason, could not copy. Yet, they seemed to continue to patrol and not talk to anyone. The most terrifying thing, however, we found about their weapons wasn't the fact that they could simply rip apart a planet's surface. No. The most terrifying notion was that sometimes their weapons are not weapons. We realized this with the invasion of the Freakamoose homeworld. Where their homeworld was sitting, even if they could get one of these directed energy weapons to actually function, it would end up ripping its own ship apart. We knew this, which is why it was held so well, and why it was used as a staging ground for any type of raids or recon missions we had against the humans. However, the humans realized this, and they came. They came swiftly. The humans, however, could not fire through to strike the surface with their own weapons. Maybe with some of their projectile weapons, but in all honesty, given the topography, it didn't matter. They would simply poke holes in the planet, and the holes were so small that nothing would actually matter. This meant that they would have to actually land on the planet. We were ready for this. Well, we thought we were. They landed in massive pods that had their own self-defense systems. As they crashed down, many of our own people began to fire into the pods, hoping to strike the humans as the doors opened. But instead, the top of the pod seemed to open up, and ballistics began firing out at such a rapid succession, we thought that some sort of saw was being used to tear everyone apart. And as everyone ducked for cover, the doors blew open, flying forward and crushing everyone in front of them. And then armored humans rushed out. The armor blocked all of our sensors. We couldn't find them with heat sensors, with any type of radio transmission. It was nothing. They were just ghosts in dark armor that came and ripped through them all, carrying weapons that are larger than our torso. It was insane. We moved everybody into position so that they would have to come building by building, burrow by burrow, hovel by hovel to make their way through. We thought this would slow them down. We thought that after they kicked in a few doors or blew a few walls that they would get tired and they would have to stop. Then we could counterattack. But for some reason, they just didn't stop. They moved in from structure to structure, and we noticed that right before they came in, they would get in a strange line next to the door. We heard them say something strange about stacking something up, but we couldn't understand it. Then we knew what would happen next as we all braced for it, and they would throw a death orb in first. This death orb would seem to come in and never land the same way twice. Sometimes it would drop right into our lap. Sometimes it would bounce off the wall. Sometimes it would bounce off the floor. But it only gave a few seconds for us to find some sort of cover. But if we were able to find cover and absorb the blast, then we could simply raise our weapons up and fire back, forcing the humans to back out away. They could try it again, but they would start to lose their own as eventually our shots would actually get through. Seeing that this wasn't working as well, they began to throw in a strange cylinder that seemed to land, and then we wondered what the hell was that, and then it exploded. This would mess up all of our sensors. Our auditory nerves would hear nothing but some sort of beep, and we wouldn't see anything as the flash that came out of it just was unbelievably blinding. And then they would simply charge in. The humans had learned, and it seemed they never stopped learning. As we started to realize that this cylinder would mean that we would have to duck behind something softer, something that could actually absorb the noise, cover our auditory nerves, and open our other orifices so that the concussion did not hurt us so much. We found that we were being able to absorb this strike the same way as their death orbs. We still had problems, but we were still slowing them down. Then the humans did something odd. On the recording, it's easy to see. The humans stacked up on the side. You could see on one of the other cameras that those that they were facing were inside, getting ready to ambush those coming in. The door was breached by a small charge, and the door fell down with a giant thud. Then something yellow flew through. No one knew what it was. It landed and seemed to sit in the middle of the room, and it appeared to be a synthetic model of some sort of semi-aquatic creature. Everyone stopped and looked at it and were confused until it exploded. Due to our fear of the human weapons, And we don't even know what's a weapon anymore with the humans. We have been begging for peace. And thankfully, the humans have recently granted it. They have laid out their conditions and, of course, given a three-dimensional holomap to let us know what their territory is and to stay out. We asked them to join the Representative Council. However, the Council of Representatives, inside the chamber, there's always a seat that is empty. Right next to the seat is a phrase, a strange phrase in a human language. We know this. We've all memorized it. And it's a warning to stay away from their territory, because if we do, we will find out the meaning of the phrase, duck around and find out.